Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about the 6 standards of effective pedagogy. I have to admit I'm slightly obsessed with these standards because I think they do such a good job of operationalizing a lot of what we talk about and know as great theory around learning. So all of these standards are grounded in Vygotskian sociocultural theory, and the last standard actually adds critical theory to that. And so these I have seen personally in my own practice and working with other teachers and read in the research how really transformative these standards can be if we apply them to our practice. I definitely have learned from applying them in mine. Even just last semester, I did a study in my class with undergraduates, all pre-service teachers, where I overtly and explicitly applied these 6 standards to my practice, and I collected data around it, and the students love the class. I have lots of data that suggests how valuable this approach was to support their learning, and where they really felt like capable, knowledgeable collaborators with me rather than students that I was transferring knowledge to. So I think there's such great benefit to these standards, and especially as they exist as a whole system. It isn't that one standard alone will accomplish everything we need to accomplish. It's really that as practitioners, we integrate these 6 standards across our practice. So the first one is joint productive activity. This is where teachers and students produce together. And at the highest levels, the teacher is working with a small group of students producing either a tangible or intangible product. An intangible product can be understandings, ideas. A tangible product can be co-writing an essay or things like that. So this was actually the first standard that really revolutionized my practice. Even working with adults, I will organize my class so that I have a chance to collaborate and collectively work with my students as a member of their group. And what that offers me is a chance to get to know my students so much better than I ever had before, as well as really understand where misunderstandings are coming from, to see where their thinking is going with new ideas and concepts, to be a collaborator with a small group of students where I really get to hear each of them participate and engage with the ideas and the content. I learn so much more about what's going on in their minds and how I can support their learning than I ever learned from any other form of collaborative learning. So I think joint productive activity is critically important. It doesn't only have to occur with the teacher and a small group of students, but for you as a teacher to be rated at the highest level for joint productive activity, you do need to be positioned as a collaborator with students in a small group. So a joint productive activity creates that opportunity for the authentic and social interaction for communicative purposes that we talked about in terms of the principles of second language acquisition. You will create meaningful spaces for students to use language in your class and for you to hear how they're engaging with it so you can understand ways to support its continued development. Speaking of language development, the second standard is actually language and literacy development. So this is really important that across the curriculum and across all content areas, students are developing strong language and literacy skills. Because this is sociocultural instructional practices, the way that we think about language and literacy development is about assisting students in developing their language. This means we model, we provide feedback against a standard, we question, we give all sorts of assistance and support to help students develop language and literacy. And we have to think about it across all 4 language domains. So listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Oftentimes in classes, we will give sustained opportunities for students to engage in reading or writing, but sometimes listening and speaking really get left to the wayside, and it's really important that we pay attention to that as well. The third standard is called contextualization. It's making meaning, connecting school to students' lives. This is a really important piece because so much of what we do in school can really at times only be relevant in school. So the more we can do to help students develop broad thinking skills and make connections to the important content that we are teaching them to their lives outside of school, the broader impact that learning is going to have. This requires teachers to know students really well, to seek information about their lives outside of school, their previous understandings, and then to make meaningful connections and really weave those understandings through the lesson or unit to contextualize the new learning that's occurring. The next standard is called challenging activities or teaching complex thinking. When we think about this standard, we often think of like the Bloom's taxonomy and trying to engage students in more than recitation, but doing analysis and evaluation and these higher level thinking. It's really important that we offer students clear standards of what that kind of performance looks like and really useful feedback so they know if they're performing at these higher levels. We can't expect students to be able to do complex thinking tasks without strong examples of what that looks like and the ability to be scaffolded up to those challenging tasks. The fifth standard is called Instructional Conversation. It's teaching through conversation. This is the other standard that I think has really revolutionized my pedagogy because in combination with joint productive activity, it positions me with a small group of students, maybe 2 to 7 students, where we talk. And in fact, student talk outweighs teacher talk. And it has to be planned and organized. It's very difficult to get the students to talk more than you talk. It's also difficult as a teacher to maybe not talk when you should be allowing students to talk. So it takes some careful thought and planning. I usually plan out questions that I will ask, and many of them, so that when we get to a gap, I have a lot of ideas about questions I can ask to keep generating more student talk. This is really dialogic learning. And it's a great opportunity for, again, authentic uses of language in the classroom. The final standard is critical stance, and this is teaching to transform inequities. In this standard, teachers and students work together to understand how issues of power and privilege play out in society, how students may be marginalized or positioned in positive or negative ways, and then collectively, they strive to transform that. There's been teachers who have done this work grounded in content standards and have been able to help students develop a lot of confidence and understandings around how the world is structured and operated in ways that they can proactively engage to battle inequity. One group of students in 6th grade at a middle school decided that they wanted to battle issues of bullying in their school. So they started a movement where they would make announcements every morning for the whole school about how to be a good friend and how to stop bullying. They made t-shirts, they wrote little grants and sold pencils that had messages on them. There was a lot of things that they were able to do to really transform the culture and climate inside their school so that it was a more equitable culture and climate. And it was the students taking leadership over the ideas. In a recent study, it appears that the use of critical stance actually helps develop more and higher student gains on standardized assessments scores than even teaching complex thinking. It's that way to take a lot of what we know and do in class and really push students to a higher level of thinking and engaging, but also really explicitly for the purpose to transform inequities and to battle and disrupt the way that they're perpetuated. So in total, these 6 standards work together, and they're critical sociocultural instructional practices that can really transform teaching to be student-centered, to be meaningful, for students to have options and really make meaning of what we do in school for their lives outside of school. They have been demonstrated to be extremely effective and support high levels of student learning outcomes, particularly for multilingual learners. So I encourage you to learn more about these standards and really try to integrate them into your own practice. Thank you.